Guess what? Sunday Sanctuary is produced by a non-profit, which makes perfect sense, right? And it's also quite fun because you never know where the money's going to come from. So this is your invitation to join that fun by supporting this kaupapa and helping to share something you love with even more people looking for soul-nourishing spiritual conversations. It's simple. You can choose between a one-off donation or become a regular supporter and help Sam and I keep making Sunday Sanctuary. To give now, head to our website, sundaysanctuary.nz. Kia ora, and thank you.
Baby, I can find my treasure. There's too much for me to do. Baby, I can find my treasure. Maybe my treasure rests in you.
Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
E ngā manu, e ngā reo, mai ngā hau e whā. Tatu mai nei ki te manga o tēnei rākau whakaruru hau. Tau mai nei ki tēnei kaupapa e papaho atu nei ki a koutou arā ko Sunday Sanctuary. Ko Petra Bagust tēnei e rere ana ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa. To everyone from each corner of this country, come and rest on the branch of this sheltered tree. You are welcome to this project, this space, Sunday Sanctuary. I'm Petra Bagust and I acknowledge you all. Okay, being misunderstood. It's not a good time for me. How is it for you? Look, here's how I tend to react to being misunderstood, most especially by the people who are closest to me. I'm upset. I'm potentially surprised or shocked. I feel unseen and unknown, like I might as well give up and shove off because if that's what you think of me, I'm out. It seems to me to feel like the opposite of being seen and known, of being, really safe. So is being misunderstood unsafe? And if so, to whom? The person who does it or the person who receives it? Look, in those moments of being really misunderstood, it's hard to see or think straight. And this episode has got me to wondering about my role as a giver or receiver of misunderstanding. How often do I misunderstand others? Do I project or judge or decide what they are thinking, meaning, saying, what their intentions are? I am really interested to see where these conversations take us. So let's go on a wee discovery session together. Later this episode, Counsellor Shirley Pastroff and I will talk about all the ways we can deal with being misunderstood and give us some insight into her own experience of it, perhaps even discover where the pain of it comes from. First up, though, it's the return of former student radio DJ, punk rocker and university chaplain turned Anglican priest, the wonderful, the one and only, Reverend Spanky Moore. Kia ora, Spanky Moore, or Father Spanknuts is what your completely inappropriate title says on your computer screen.
I thought only we could see that. That's quite fun. I didn't realise that.
A sense of humour. It's good for the soul.
Yeah, it is really good.
And nothing really reduces humour faster, perhaps, or as well. I'm sure there are many things that reduce humour, actually, as being misunderstood. And for some reason, when producer Sam and I were thinking about being misunderstood, you came to mind.
All right, that's nice. That's great. I have had a bit of an experience, as I'm sure you have too, of being misunderstood, where I'm a man who often says humorous things with a dry wit. And for some reason that puts some people quite on edge, because there's another part of me, Petra. The other part of me is basically the most earnest, encouraging, kind-hearted man. And so these two things sometimes come into contrast, where most of the time, if a camera's not rolling or I'm not doing an interview, or I'm not, presenting something, I'm mostly just earnestly encouraging. There isn't I'm not taking the piss. There's nothing going on. But that people are often very, very nervous around that. Like they think that, I'm about to get them. But I've had it in another way as well. I don't know if you've ever had this, where you've never said something. You've never even implied you think it. Right? But that somehow people, by the way you look, your name, how you smell, they just have come to a conclusion that this is your opinion on a certain topic, or this is what you're about. And it's interesting how being misunderstood sometimes isn't even to do with communicating. It's to do what people assume to be true about you. And you just want to protest. You want to say, did I ever say that? Tell me the day and the date and the time when I ever said that. I never said that. I know I never said it because I was thinking it, but I didn't say it out loud. But there can be this real sense where it's funny how concerned we get about what other people are thinking about us and saying about us behind our back and whether we think it's fair. It's a massive part of being a human, isn't it? Being preoccupied.
This is how it feels to me. It feels like a massive part of being human, right? The injustice of being misunderstood, the defensiveness that kind of the ire that rises up. And for me, it's happening most impactfully in intimate relationships where I feel that person should know me.
Oh, yeah.
So if I'm misunderstood by a significant other and I think, how could you think that I would be that cruel, that I would care that little, that I would treat you that badly? Like, and the offence that I've received actually becomes like they've misunderstood me and I am offended. I am.
Well, yeah, Petra, I might have the opposite experience. How could you think that I care that much, that I'm that easily offended, that I even give you a second thought? See? So it's funny, right? You can kind of feel misunderstood either way, depending on your wrath, I guess. So, yeah, it is. It is fascinating. I guess I know I meet some people who it's like water off a duck's back and they claim to not care and maybe they don't mind that much what other people think. But you spend an extraordinary amount of time trying to second guess and then telling yourself that's probably not what's happening, about what do people think about me, how do they perceive me, and what are they talking about me to other people. And one of the hardest things about being misunderstood is, you won't hear this very often, what I'm about to say, Petra, people are talking about us behind our back. Like, it is happening. And do you know how we know it's happening? Because you and I both talk about people behind their back. It happens. It's sort of part of being a human. And maybe we're saying nice things, but sometimes humans have such a propensity to judge. We're often saying, Petra's good. She's good and all that. She's got a lot going on, but she'd be just that little bit better if she just sorted out. And it's hard to imagine that you are not privy to all of these conversations about you that are probably totally getting you wrong. And it can really do your head in trying to deal with that.
Or getting me right. They're quite possibly right. One of the things that I liked was hearing Elizabeth Gilbert from the Eat, Pray, Love book talk about a woman who came up and said, I suffered terrible physical abuse in my relationship as well, and I just want to thank you for your book. And the lady went away, and Elizabeth Gilbert said there was no physical abuse in my book. I didn't suffer it, and I didn't write it. But the person saw themselves in the depiction of relationship in her book. And so I guess for me that was an invitation not to try and, control what everybody thinks, because they will come at the world, life, myself, and everybody else with their own perspective. But it's also this idea of how could I be harder to offend? How could I not take offence? Like if Elizabeth had been very offended and got defensive and said, I certainly didn't say that, and my ex-husband never did that. Like there's a lot of energy happening there. I'm wanting to kind of like wriggle down and go, what is this? The need to be understood is the desperate human need to be understood, part of our sense of self-identity and belonging. We want to belong in the world in a way that is true or just? We want to be, or is it that we want to deeply need to be known?
Yeah, I guess it's all of the above, and being healthy involves a sense of self that's not too dependent on others, because, you know, other people are cracked mirrors, but then also it's pretty natural and good to want to be in relationship with others where they get you and where they, and particularly, you know, the ones that we love the most wound us the most. And so,
I know.
You know, and so it's this real problem, isn't it? So hard. I did have something.
Could we just solve that while we're here?
I was away on a Easter retreat. I went away with one of my best friends, and it's a talking retreat. We just ask each other questions non-stop for sort of 2.5 days. It's very intense. It's very difficult, but it's incredible, and we love each other. But I remember towards the end of the retreat, after you've revealed everything that you're like, they've lived with you for two days, I said to him, "What's a character issue you think I should work on this year?" Which is quite a courageous question to ask someone who you've just hung out.
It's a courageous question.
And he looked at me and he said, "You can be quite belligerent." And I wanted to protest, because I wanted to say to him, "I'm not belligerent." Which, of course, you can't say when someone accuses you. I want to say, I'm passionate. And you have an
Absolutely
highly misunderstood passion for belligerence. And then I laughed and I realised, if I think it's passion but everyone else thinks it's belligerence, maybe it's not working in the way that I thought it would. So this desire, I loved him, and he said it in love. But it's easy for what we think we're putting out to be picked up in a different way, and there's so much of that. I had something I wanted to share with you, and I don't know how to frame it up, and I'm going to try in the best way that I can.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if this...
Just take a deep breath.
I'm not sure if this is something that has already been experienced or explored on the Sunday Sanctuary podcast, but maybe not. When I was having a good old burnout episode and was having all sorts of issues some years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, I went and I talked to a Catholic priest friend of mine, and I told him all of my troubles. And he said to me, "It sounds like you have ego issues, my son." And I was like, maybe. And he said, "I would like you to pray something called the Litany of Humility." And I said, "Sure."
Challenging.
"Sure. Fine. How bad can it be?" It is the most challenging, whether you call it a prayer or a poem, it is this. It's like an MRI of the soul. It exposes so much of your prickly self as you read through this, that the interesting thing about it is more what you refuse to say rather than what you can say. The things where your heart says, "I'm not going to say that. That sounds like the worst." And then you go, aha. So I thought I might share. Would you mind if I share this with you in case it's something that...
No, I would really like you to share it with me. And first I want to reflect back. If the feedback you're getting is, hey, you think it's passion, but it's reading belligerent, like maybe sometimes the being misunderstood is like the crack in the armour to let us see ourselves in a different light and not have to defend or to comprehend that we're the ones perhaps misunderstanding. So anyway, share your scary prose with me. I'm all ears, all heart.
The point of this is that you read through it and you see what is the thing that just agitates you as you go. All right, here we go. Petra, prepare to vomit in a bucket. You're not going to like any of this. It goes like this. From the desire of being loved, deliver me, Lord. From the desire of being extolled, deliver me, Lord. From the desire of being honoured, deliver me, Lord. From the desire of being praised, deliver me, Lord. From the desire of being preferred to others, deliver me, Lord. From the desire of being consulted, deliver me, Lord. From the desire of being approved, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of being humiliated, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of being despised, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of suffering rebukes, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of being misrepresented, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of being forgotten, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of being ridiculed, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of being wronged, deliver me, Lord. From the fear of being suspected, deliver me, Lord.
Wow. I could hang out with that list for a while.
Yeah, and what you find is when you kind of go through it with people, they go, well, I'm not going to pray that. It's not, I want to be loved. And you go, well, I'm not saying that it's inappropriate that you might want to be loved and that there's appropriate honour. But what we're talking around is the desire and especially the fear. That fear of being misrepresented doesn't serve us, right? And it's just interesting as you go through that, the ones that stick, because like I said, I think it's like a little X-ray that says, ooh, we got something there.
Yep.
So I thought that was a good sort of little on-ramp, in-ramp, around ramp when we're thinking around what do we do with being misunderstood.
Well, it just reminds me of a scenario that I was in and I caught myself feeling better than. I caught myself in a situation where I was with people who think they're better than, and I thought, I don't think I've got the answer, so I am better than you people who think you are better. And I went, that doesn't work. This doesn't work. I need to unpack this. And even just if we could hold misunderstanding, like I'm feeling like, to be misunderstood, what if it was okay to be misunderstood? What if it was just part of the human condition? What if there were great reasons to be misunderstood? What if being misunderstood or understood changed nothing? What if my desire to be understood was something that would cause harm, to myself or others? And in releasing that desire, I might grow to understand. I might be less judgy. I might be less defensive, less addicted to my own good name.
Yeah, I think your own good. I reckon that's one part is, if you're someone that has questionable reputation and your name's already dragged through the mud, you don't even have the hope of sort of holding on to, kind of reputation. And I guess we all bring different things that we think is good and that we don't want to let go of. And it's such a struggle when I've had in my own, because I work in ministry world, I have had experiences where to do the right thing means to shut your mouth and to have people misunderstand what was done and say things that weren't true, but that was the right thing to do. And that made me feel like throwing up. Because you wanted to say, well, look, mate, let me tell you all the facts of what was actually going on. But that you would, and I think what you said about the human experience is one of navigating, being misunderstood by others, and also misunderstanding ourselves. I mean, we make out as if we understand ourselves, and a lot of the time our motivations are mixed. And sometimes people outside of ourselves understand us better than we do. So a lot of it is about perception management and not feeling that sense of injustice and whatnot. I was thinking about how the challenge is then not to have a little pity party about, issuing press releases so that people absolutely understand what really happened, which is what social media became for a while there. Do you remember that? How people used to always do edicts on sort of, here's what really happened in my private life, people. And it was sort of like putting out a press release to try and let people really know.
Clarify the situation.
It is, and it's not easy, but it is interesting to think about, rather than me needing to be, there's this famous phrase, seek to understand rather than to be understood. Not easy. And by the way, it's good to be understood. Okay, so it's good to have places where with your friends and your family you're understood, but that often in our work environments or with our more distant friends, when unpleasant things happen, sometimes it's, okay, I'm going to seek to understand more than needing to be understood. It involves that kind of principle of sometimes taking the log out of our own eye and going, oh, well, we tend to judge people by their actions and hope they'll judge us by our intent.
Yep, I hear you.
And we hope it goes the other way. And sometimes you can say, if I took the log out of my own eye and said, what was their real intent? And have I done this to people sometimes? It can just help calm the farm a little. Relinquishing the need to be in control is so hard. Control of my own, how people are talking about me and my own narrative. Sometimes I tell myself this person's behaviour is explainable but not excusable, but I can see that there's a lot of venom in this snake and it's bit me, and I can have a kind of compassion for them without excusing it, and it can be helpful to just calm myself down and reflect on that. And the last thing I'd say is that people aren't rational, but they do make sense. We often just don't have the full picture.
Okay.
So, like, sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes you're going to go, that one he's crazy and he's just absolutely mad. I mean, there are some people like that, but it's very uncommon that so they might be very emotional and not rational, you can't understand them. But there is a sense that if you could get to the bottom of their full story, you'd probably say, I can understand how this
that makes sense.
happened.
And yeah.
I find that if I can turn my anger into curiosity, and if I can invite this misunderstoodness as a pruning, as an opportunity to experience a challenge to my ego that I hope will help me become a bit more loving and compassionate, then sometimes it's the sore points of being misunderstood are a great invitation. Do you see me smiling through my gritted teeth? Because
I do. I see you smiling through your gritted teeth. I think that's tough. Very good.
I just think if you're going to be someone who impacts the world positively, you will be misunderstood. And it would be a horrible ceiling. It would be a horrible limiting factor for you to do all the good you could in the world because your greatest fear was to be misrepresented and misunderstood.
Brilliant. Like, I love that. Don't allow the desire not to be misunderstood to fuel your behaviour. But it's even thinking again about having an argument and not justifying my position, not having the last word where I explain myself so they finally get it. Like, that is almost excruciating psychologically. But what could happen or would happen if I zipped it? And I'm not saying don't speak up in my relationship, but I'm saying not seek first to justify myself and be understood at the expense of the other person. Like, I'll try it, and get back to you, see how it goes.
I want to commend to you the spiritual practice of belligerence. And I think if you keep on berating people with your ideas, eventually they pretend to yield.
Spanky Moore, such joy.
Great to see you.
It's always a pleasure and never a chore to chinwag with Reverend Spanky Moore. I didn't mean that to rhyme, but I'm happy it did, and I'm going to stop it there because, honestly, I do feel like the litany of humility is something I'd like to hang out with. That idea that where we would find a catch, a discomfort, a pause, a intake of breath, being somewhere that is telling us or showing us something that we might want to look further into. That's so useful. What a good guide it is to be like, oh no, that realization of what is it in me that I might even be projecting onto somebody else. I might be pushing it out because it's an uncomfortable discovery. So I'm going to hang out with a litany of humility. And look, comedy does seem like the perfect place to explore being misunderstood. So from his 2002 stand-up show called Circle, here is Eddie Izzard doing a sketch about Darth Vader in the Death Star canteen.
But there must have been a Death Star canteen, yeah? There must have been a cafeteria downstairs, in between battles, where Darth Vader could just chill and go down. I will have the penne alla arrabbiata. You'll need a tray. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? This is not a game of who the f*** are you. For I am Vader. Darth Vader. Lord Vader. I can kill you with a single thought. Well, you'll still need a tray. No, I will not need a tray. I do not need a tray to kill you. I can kill you without a tray, with the power of the Force, which is strong within me. Even though I could kill you with a tray if I so wished. For I would hack at your neck with the thin bit until the blood flowed across the canteen floor. No, the food is hot. You'll need a tray to put the food on. Oh, I see the food is hot. I'm sorry. I did not realize. Oh, tray for the... Yes. I thought you were challenging me to the fight to the death. Fight to the death? This is a canteen. I work here. Yes, but I am Vader. I am Lord Vader. Everyone challenges me to a fight to the death. Lord Darth Vader. I'm Darth Vader. Sir Lord Vader. Sir Lord Darth Vader. Lord Vader of Cheam. Sir Lord Baron von Vaderham. The Death Star. I've run the Death Star. What's the Death Star? This is the Death Star. You're in the Death Star. I run this star. This is the star. This is a star. I run it. I'm your boss. You're Mr. Stevens. No, who is Mr. Stevens? He's head of catering. I'm not head of catering. I am Vader. I can kill catering with a thought. What? I can kill you all. I can kill me with a thought. Just... I'll get a tray. This one's wet. And this one's wet. And this one's wet.
You feel free to send this episode to a friend who you think would gain greater understanding by listening to it. And leave us a review on your podcast player of choice. So many to choose from, so little time. We're at Sunday Sanctuary NZ on Instagram if you'd like to hang out with us there. We always love it when you contribute. So thanks for your feedback.
Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
Of these words I've tried to recite, they are close but not quite. Of these words I've tried to recite, they are close but not quite. So misunderstood, so misunderstood.
This is an excerpt of Close But Not Quite by Everything Is Recorded, a posthumous collab between the late, great Curtis Mayfield and British singer Sampha. Time for community life now, and we asked you, what's the worst part about being misunderstood? And this is what you had to say. Loneliness. Others aren't on the same page, or perceived potential rejection. The worst part is when you don't get the opportunity to explain the reality. What about being mistreated, not valued? Exhausting yourself to be heard and understood. The worst part about being misunderstood is feeling unheard. Or someone arriving at the wrong conclusion about me and feeling powerless to change that. The worst part of being misunderstood is people thinking you're stupid, uneducated, or misinformed. Feeling misunderstood triggers my personal, unbearable feeling of feeling stupid. And finally, as a caring person who tries to communicate thoughtfully, being misunderstood is frustrating and very uncomfortable.
To do, reciting the makings of you.
Thank you so much for your responses. And now here's a very personal reflection on communion with Frank Ritchie.
Communion feels like a calling back to. It's an ancient tradition based on an event that happened the night before Jesus was put on trial and executed. It's that Last Supper, when Jesus shared his final meal with his friends, saying, remember me. Over the many years that I have engaged in that tradition in various ways, different parts of the story have stood out to me. For this reflection, I have to own up to being someone who hates being misunderstood. As someone with a very minor profile who has spent 2.5 decades sharing thoughts and opinions on all sorts of topics in the public space, being misunderstood has been part and parcel of my existence. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that it shouldn't have taken me long to accept that. But no, I've spent hours and hours in futile discussions, particularly online, hoping that I could help people understand and ultimately agree with me once they properly understood my perspective. Countless hours of emotions, frustrations, second-guessing myself, painstakingly trying to explain, and stresses caused from scenarios in my head as I've played out imaginary conversations. And then there's Jesus, whom my life is dedicated to, and who every day I want to be a little more like. He was constantly misunderstood, partly because what he talked about was often outside of the frame of reference of those who listened. And it wasn't just people on the periphery who misunderstood him, it was those closest to him as well. There are also those who understood the claims he was making to a degree, but because they didn't quite get it or didn't believe him, they wanted to kill him. It's one thing to deal with keyboard trolls on the internet, it's another thing to deal with those willing to literally nail you to a cross. Now, I do think there's an element in communication where we need to do our best to help people hear what we're trying to convey. But there's also a point where we need to be okay with being misunderstood. The how of that is the question. Just before Jesus was betrayed and arrested, in his anguish, he spent time in prayer in a garden. He knew what was coming, so he was turning to a source that was more important to him than the opinions of others. A source we see him constantly turning to and speaking about, God the Father, his Father. That relationship and his sense of mission in the world that flowed from it stopped him from being thrown about by everyone else, whether they understood him or not. He was grounded in a deep sense of who he was in that relationship and what the point of his life was. Ultimately, it carried him through betrayal by those close to him, a false trial, mockery, being beaten, and his death. That sense of connection to something deeper than the thoughts and opinions of others, that isn't tossed around by the latest noise, whether it's directed at me or not, that's what I want. So I keep coming back to that ancient ritual of communion, because it grounds me in the one who knows me and loves me no matter what. There, I am fully understood.
Next up, our waiata for this episode. Seems obvious when you think about it. It's called Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood by the inimitable Nina Simone.
Baby, you understand me now. If sometimes you see that I'm mad, don't you know no one alive can always be an angel? When everything goes wrong, you see some bad. But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. You know, sometimes, baby, I'm so carefree, with a joy that's hard to hide. And then sometimes again it seems that all I have is worry. And then you're bound to see my other side. But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. problems, and I get more than my share. But that's one thing I never mean to do, 'cause I love you. Oh, baby, I'm just human. Don't you know I have faults like anyone? Sometimes I find myself alone regretting some little foolish thing, some simple thing that I've done. 'Cause I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. Don't let me be misunderstood. I try so hard, so please don't let me be misunderstood.
Now, before we go to our next guest, counsellor and therapist Shirley Pastroff, we have a sacred text. It's from the movie Arrival, and in the film, aliens arrive on Earth, hence the title. Now, the human's journey of learning how to communicate with them involves a lot of misunderstanding, and this misunderstanding is only made worse for the military people who are wedded to a very specific worldview and often driven by fear. Misunderstanding is a big theme of this film, which if you haven't seen is well worth a watch. This scene starts with an army commander who's asking one of the scientists trying to communicate with the aliens why they haven't made more progress.
Everything you're doing there, I have to explain to a room full of men whose first and last question is how can this be used against us?
Kangaroo.
What is that?
In 1770, Captain James Cook's ship ran aground off the coast of Australia, and he led a party into the country, and they met the Aboriginal people. One of the sailors pointed at the animals that hop around and put their babies in their pouch, and he asked what they were, and the Aborigines said, kangaroo. It wasn't until later that they learned that kangaroo means I don't understand.
I can sell that for now.
Fair.
And remember what happened to the Aborigines? A more advanced race nearly wiped them out.
It's a good story.
Thanks. It's not true. But it proves my point.
Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
Shirley Pastroff, it is such a delight to have you in the studio with me. You are a therapist and an author of The Mindful Parent. And I've been to your parenting course. It was revolutionary, despite how quite old my children were at the time. In fact, it was so good, and I missed the first half of the first one, that I went twice.
Did.
That's not your problem. That's mine. I loved it, actually. Okay, we'll probably edit some of that out. The producer is shaking his head.
Okay.
This episode, we're talking about being misunderstood. And we asked the community how it felt. And some of the words that came up with how it felt were, it activated my unbearable feeling of being stupid. It feels like not being seen, not being known. People, the worst thing about being misunderstood actually tracks quite deep. As a therapist, can you talk to us about the idea, I guess, I think this seems to be a universal human emotion. I suspect most everybody feels misunderstood at times, and we don't seem to like it at all.
Yes.
What's that about?
Yes, it's a deeply uncomfortable feeling that some feel acutely.
Okay.
Some feel less acutely and have learned to cover it up or to not feel it in various ways that are not necessarily particularly helpful but are really valid according to their story. So what I've noticed both in myself and in years of sitting with people talking about their most difficult experiences, there's a mismatch between the strategies we have to communicate to people who we are, which is generally our words and our actions, and what's actually going on inside ourselves, which is quite private, which is how we feel and what we're thinking. And so we're spending a lot of time trying to put our thoughts and feelings into words and actions and hoping that someone else, especially really close people, will read us and read the kind of attempt to describe who we are, how we're feeling, what matters to us, what it feels like when we're hurt. All those different things we're experiencing viscerally in our bodies, but we don't have our body to share with someone else. So we're trying to find words or sometimes non-words, actions, often called passive-aggressive, actions to try and explain what's going on for us. And so the deeper we're trying to communicate what's going on for us, the more painful it is when somebody else, especially if that somebody else is important to us, the more difficult it is when they don't get it. And we use that phrase all the time. You know, my dad gets me, my mum doesn't get me, my best friend gets me, my partner doesn't get me. And
you
that's
just
what
don't
we're
get
saying.
it.
Yeah, you just don't get it. And what we're saying is you haven't heard me try and communicate what's happening inside me, or my words have failed to reach you when I thought they were clear, or as clear as I can get.
What I'm hearing you say is that there's an element of being misunderstood that is lost in translation. Do you think that we always know or are aware of the fact that we are feeling this viscerally and attempting to communicate it, and we think we're doing a good job? We think we're being really clear as, clear as clear, but we're probably being clear as mud?
Yes. I mean, it's very fast.
Okay.
So, I mean, the work I do as a therapist is to slow people down, do the U-turn and try and figure out what's going on in them first. But lots of people don't have the luxury of having that opportunity. So generally what happens is we either say or do something that's important to us and that somebody else clearly has misinterpreted or misunderstood or felt differently about. And then we get a very fast reaction. Often it's injustice. Sometimes it's a feeling of real separateness, especially in an intimate relationship. We feel a split or a separation, and that can go to the guts of our body in terms of either our heart space or often our stomach, where we feel that either rage or disappointment or defeated, depending on our personality type. And then we go into some form of defensive action usually, and that defense might be attack. So for some people that's a lot of words. That would be me. Lots of words to try and explain. And other people respond with withdrawal. Like they'll go silent, they'll go quiet. In my experience, it's personality and childhood upbringing it's formed in those times. So for a parent who's got a lot of words to say to what we call a flight style child or a compliant child, they'll often go into what I feel and think doesn't matter because mum or dad's opinions and voice is very loud, so I'll just trail along even if underneath I'm resisting. I'm not saying it. More what we call a fight child will argue back and start to develop a strategy of explaining themselves, but usually in what I call red brain is where there's some cortisol and adrenaline running through the system. And unfortunately for us, that makes our communication less clear rather than
more open to being misunderstood, because the tone can be, like you say, quite forthright or aggressive or angry sounding. I think, not all about me, but I think I'm both. So is there that situation where sometimes you withdraw and sometimes you put in a lot of words?
Often it's a safety thing. So with people you know really well, often the words will flow a little bit more easily. I'm hesitating because there are many instances where there are exceptions to that rule. And often there's also maybe a power dynamic. So if you feel a little more powerful than the other person, you may say more. If for some reason there's a power dynamic, whether it's a boss or a bigger personality person, we'll often go into the self-edit where we don't try and communicate.
So, just even opening this up makes me go, oh, this is deep. This is sensitive. This is This is nuanced. This is like even when, as you say the word visceral, like in this episode I've talked about how for me being misunderstood is like, do you not know me? How can you not understand me? Why don't you see? How could you think that about me? And that is, like you say, it feels like a separation. It feels like you are, there's a chasm between you and the person who perhaps you're trying to communicate with. And maybe look at how we might find ways that are less defensive and maybe more healing, what we might need.
And more effective.
Yeah.
So we actually really want to do this well so that people will understand us.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
I'm in.
Is to get skills at being understood by others. Yeah. That word chasm and separation is really important because it's actually an attachment longing. So we come into the world now that we're beyond the just basic survival brain, and we have a complex prefrontal cortex and a complex emotional brain. It's one of the needs as a child is to be understood, not just to be fed and watered and housed. And so depending on how well our caregivers have done it, depends on how big the longing is and how visceral the craving is as an adult. So those who were brought up in ways where they felt really understood have a buffer. They have a real suspension system around their being understood because they've been well understood. So if somebody doesn't understand them, it tends to not go straight down to that hijack space. It's kind of like an assumption I will be understood, and if somebody doesn't, that's unusual. And the nervous system is wired for being understood. Obviously, in my job, I don't see a lot of people like that. They're not looking. They're not looking for therapy, but I do meet them, and it's not that I'm admiring of them. I was
going to say, do you give them a hug? No.
Well just feel more like good on those parents for having really taken the time to spend time to understand maybe more than one child. If, however, we have what I think is probably a more normal experience where there's been a mismatch of some kind between you and one or both of your parents, or one was unwell or not there, or, all sorts of reasons. This isn't parent blame. This is just life happens.
Yeah.
And so if we kind of get launched into adulthood with a sense of I'm not easy to understand, or I'm not worth taking the time to understand, or even deeper, I don't really understand myself, then when other people, then that longing for somebody else to mirror you back to you is really strong. And the closer you get to somebody, whether it's a romantic partner or a best friend, or later on maybe your own children, that feeling of I need you to see me in order to feel safe and put together. And that's when, like you say, that chasm and that pain of self-defense, which moves into either kind of persuasion or withdrawal, depending on your personality, comes into play. But the body really does get activated, and for good reason.
So then, in a way, that body activation, is that a good place to start to understand how you respond to being misunderstood and what your need might be? Because if we can notice the really wise messages our bodies are giving us, it's something to work with.
Yeah, I generally always start with the body because the body is the only part of us that can't lie to us. So our emotions are quite complicated. Our thoughts can get quite clever and confusing and sneaky. The body is very honest. And so it means that first feeling of pain, or that first feeling of rage, or that first feeling of confusion, you'll feel it first of all here. As you can tell, I'm already putting words to it, which is already a mismatch between what I'm potentially feeling, what I'm telling you. But yeah, it's often a churning in the guts, a buzzing in the chest, we call that anxiety or stress. Sometimes I've got quite a few clients where it's a block in the throat.
Oh, yeah.
That feeling of there's kind of a
tightening restriction.
Yeah, there's a restriction there and I can't speak. So that's commonly for those people who either were talked over or have that more withdrawn personality, where they sort of edited, shut themselves up, whereas the energetic feeling in the body often leads to more words. Neither is right nor wrong, healthy. I mean, they're obviously unhealthy from the point of view of we want it to feel much more peaceful and fluid, but it's healthy in the sense of it's how you learnt to survive as a child.
So it had a place. It had a role to play.
It's
You don't have
valid.
to be, upset about that, but it is a clue that there might be a more peaceful, more comfortable, more compassionate way to be in your own body.
Yeah. I remember hearing a phrase once that said you can either be right or you can be in relationship. And it was one of those aha moments for me where I was like, oh, I'm very good at persuading people that I could be right because I can be eloquent with my ideas and very clear with my emotional landscape, make a lot of sense to myself and to others who don't have those quote-unquote skills, but actually the vulnerability of saying, I don't know, and how is this landing for you, and how does it feel for you to not be able to put your emotions into words while I can so easily and quickly. It took me a long time to realise that there was a big piece that was missing for me.
That is so fascinating. It makes sense to want to be known. That idea that we can't control or talk people into knowing us is, I think, really interesting. The phrase that I'd heard similar to that was you can be right or you can be happy, which is an interesting translation of you can be right or you can be in relationship, because our society just puts so much weight on being correct, having the answer, being the one who knows, having the info, like being on the moral high ground, on solid ground, being certain. And yet, anytime you start to peel that back, it is so blatantly apparent that uncertainty is important, that mystery exists, that if you are right, does that make someone else wrong? Like like that binary worldview is such a problematic schema, I think. So how might we work towards understanding ourselves, coming home to ourselves?
Yeah. We've talked about this technique before, but the technique that I use is to do the U-turn, which is to turn my attention away from the other person, either in the moment or retrospectively usually, towards myself and just examine what's going on in my body. I do this really quickly now, but initially takes a bit of time. So you notice where it is in your throat or your stomach or your heart or your fingers and toes, where that kind of, it's adrenaline and cortisol, so we'll always feel it, a little bit of it, if we need to work with it. If we don't, if we're misunderstood, doesn't bother us, life's too short, you just move on.
Nice.
But assuming it's had some kind of landing, we don't want to carry on the rest of our day with that feeling of rigidity or stress in the body. And so I use the words high feeling of, and it could be high feeling of being misunderstood. It could be high feeling of injustice. They've misunderstood my intentions. It could be high feeling of distance. So rather than going, how could they, which is a cognitive, understandable, defensive question, we move to high feeling of sadness or high feeling of anger or high feeling of fear. So a fear that they're not as close as I thought. Sadness that I've hurt them, but they've actually hurt me too. Anger that they didn't take the time to really listen. So we need to know what we're feeling. And then when we do that, what we're doing is mirroring ourselves.
Okay.
So we're doing the very thing that the other person wasn't able to do,
in that moment,
which is reading our body fully, noticing the sensation, naming the emotion. And then I just use the words, it makes perfect sense. Given that situation didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, makes perfect sense that you feel this way.
That sounds like radical acceptance to me. You radically accept whatever has happened and you allow it to make sense, even if cognitively you don't understand all the details.
Yeah, and I think it's, to me, I use the word tenderness. I think it's more powerful than radical acceptance.
Okay.
Radical acceptance feels slightly defeating to me.
Okay.
It's that, oh God, nobody's ever going to quite get me, I accept it. If it's got an energy of I don't accept being misunderstood, I accept being misunderstood by others, but I don't accept being misunderstood by myself.
Ooh.
I'm going to journey. That's like the coming home piece. That's the treasure hunt. And it isn't a feisty independence. It's the bit you're radically accepting is that nobody else will ever be in your body or have lived your life or know your parents inside out or have been to a hospital the way you have or been through whatever it is. No one else can or should any more than you don't want to put yourself into knowing someone else at that level because you'd lose yourself. So in the end, we're our greatest fans, are the only ones who will ever be fully there. But what I love about it is it makes it easy to share with someone else. So once you've understood yourself, it's so much easier to say to someone else, hey, there's parts about me that I would love you to know more about. And then often what happens is we share outside of the space where we wanted to be understood because the energies come out of it.
So you're saying outside of the misunderstanding, at another time, in another place, we might say, hey, what happened yesterday in the ballroom with the candlestick that I found out something about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's not a revisiting that says, I want to have another go.
I want to really tell you how
what
you're
it
wrong
is
and I was right.
you know, I want to tell you more about what happened to me in that space just because you're my person, but not because you're there to mirror me at that depth. But I don't want to do this journey on my own.
Okay, so you're not going to them with this deep need, this insatiable need that they can potentially never meet and is not their job to meet.
Well, imagine if it was your job to meet theirs.
Exactly.
Would you like that?
No, thank you.
No. So
only because I don't think I could.
Well, and also we forget that what we want from another, we wouldn't actually want to give to another. And we certainly, if you're a parent, wouldn't want any of our children to take on for another. And that's my litmus test.
Okay. If we wouldn't want our children to do that for someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, nice. So the practice is to feel and know, understand what's happening in our body, to name it. Yeah. Might have more than one name. Yeah. To allow it to make sense to ourselves.
Yes, and some of that is becoming as familiar as possible and as compassionate as possible for our story. So yes, whatever happened in the moment, that person may not have had the ideal response, but usually if it's quite a big activation, there's a story there. And we don't need to do deep therapy, but just to have a sense of, I don't know, my parents expected really high achievement from me, so I find it really difficult if somebody thinks I might have failed. When we go into the high feeling of, it makes perfect sense. We're not just saying in the moment, we're saying according to my story. And that means knowing our story and taking ourselves seriously enough that our stories matter. And then we can do the tender self-compassion piece that in the end no one else can do to the detail that we would love them to, but is in the end our own job.
It's kind of, it's beautiful. It feels like potentially a lifelong project. I think that's the perfect place to pause this conversation. And I think I have work to do.
Don't we all?
Good work, though. I love the concept of being able to understand what's happening in my body, name it, turn towards it with tenderness, and then keep practicing that. That feels like a really healthy challenge. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yay. So good. Here's a reflection, if not on being misunderstood, but on how we might think about being misunderstood, on the ideas that we hold to be true about ourselves or others, and how those ideas, if we are wedded to them and they happen to be, well, incorrect or no longer true, could cause us trouble. So, here's a benediction about ideas. God, help us with ideas, those thoughts which inform the way we live and the things we do. Let us not seize upon ideas, neither shall we hunt them down, nor steal them away. Rather, let us wait faithfully for them to approach, slowly and gently, like creatures from the wild, and let them enter willingly into our hearts and come and go freely within the sanctuary of our contemplation, informing our souls as they arrive and being enlivened by the inspiration of our hearts as they leave. These shall be our truest thoughts, our willing and effective ideas. Let us treasure their humble originality. Let us follow them gently back into the world with faith that they shall lead us to lives of harmony and integrity. Amen.